Okay, now welcome back. In our last tutorial, we talked about string functions and how to perform some operations on strings like string position, string replace, string substring, and a whole lot more, which will be discussed later. For this tutorial, I'll be teaching you about numbers. What are numbers? We know numbers are the unit of counting or measuration. Now in PHP also, PHP has a function to deal with numbers, and we know that numbers exist in form of integers or floats. Float can also be called decimal because it allows for decimal points. Now, PHP provides automatic data type conversion. If you assign an integer value to a variable, the type of that variable will automatically become an integer. Then if you assign a string to the same variable, the type will change to a string. What is this trying to say? If we have given an integer here, and let's say y equals to, and we put it here, 1000. If I come and say variable dump x, variable dump x echo have a break and variable dump y. Let's go ahead and echo this in our browser and see what we have here. If we echo it out, we can see that it's saying the first one is an integer while the second one is a string. That means like this, a variable x with 1000 and a variable y inside quote of 1000, and we give the variable dump of each. If you come to our browser and reload this, we have this. It's saying that the first one is seen as an integer while the second one is seen as a string with 4 characters in it. So we should be very careful whenever we are writing an integer. We have to ensure it is written as an integer and a string is written as a string. Example of numbers discussed are integers, float, infinity, NaN, numerical string, casting strings, and float to integers. An integer is a number without any decimal point. It can exist from negative to positive. Another important thing to know is that even if 4 times 2.5 equals to 10, the result is stored as float because one of the operands is a float. That is to say, even if we are having an operation where we multiply a float and an integer and the value given finally is an integer, it still records as a float. This is because once a float has been included in the function or the operation, it automatically sees the result as a float. Now here are some rules for integers. An integer must have at least 1 digit. An integer must not have a decimal point. An integer can either be positive or negative. Integers can be specific in 3 formats, which is decimal, base 10, hexadecimal, base 16, and octal. Integers. We have some functions for integers, like we have the isInt, which is to show that is this an integer, which is to verify whether it's an integer or not. We have this example below. I will be checking it to see what the output is going to be. So we'll go back to our text editor. Let's say I comment this one out because we don't need it, and I have another variable, say z. I have this, so I can come out and say come here and replace this and say is int of z. We want to verify if this is going to be seen as an int and if this is also going to be seen as an int. just to, if you come back to our browser and we reload this, we see the first one says, is it an int? It is true. But the second one said, is it an int? It is false, because the value of that is not an integer but a float. We also have floating numbers. A float is a number with a decimal point or a number in exponential form. We have the various categories or types in which it can be. And now we note that the float data type can commonly store a value of up to this value. That's a very large kind of value and has a maximum precision of 40 digits. PHP has the following predefined constants for floats. From PHP 7.2 upward, we have PHP float max, the largest representable floating point number, PHP float min, the smallest representable positive floating point number, float dig, and float epsilon, the smallest representative positive number x, so that x plus 1.0 epsilon is equals to 1.0. Well, all these functions might not be needed now. They are just for noting them down. They might not be used soon, but just note them down. Float has the following function to check if the type of variable is float. We have is float or is double. Is double can also be said as is float. So just like we have to verify for the integer, we also have to verify for this. So let's go back to our text editor and try that out. If we comment this guy out and we comment, I'll also comment this out, we have is float. So I want to verify, is it a float? Go back to our browser, reload. It is true, it's a float. So we are there. That's that for that. Now we have another type, infinite. A numerical value that is larger than the PHP float maximum is considered an infinite. An infinite is a number that exceeds the number or the maximum number of what PHP can accept. We have the other one, NaN, not a number. NaN stands for a not a number and is used for impossible mathematical operations. Like this to say, if we are given some mathematical operations that does not exist, it's going to assume it is not a number. Like if we are going to be given a cos 8, like this, let's go ahead and try it in our text editor. Okay, so we'll come back to our browser and to our text editor. I mean, we have a cos 8. Let's say a cos is just a mathematical function, and we have a variable dump for x. For x. I'll come back to our browser and reload. It says it's a float, but it's not a number. All right. Okay. So we have that for that. Then we have numerical strings. In PHP, numerical string function can be used to find whether a variable is numerical. That is, we are given a variable and we don't know what form it comes in. We can use the numerical function to determine whether the entry given by the user is a numerical number or not a numerical number. As we progress, we'll be seeing, once we are done with all these basic functions, we'll be going deep into having our software ready, where that will be building some software or will be building some applications that you can use with real life PHP and see how it functions properly. So for this one, just let's go. So we have the following ones. We have variable dump is numerical, variable dump is numerical, variable dump is numerical for this. Now this, I'm going to leave this as an assignment for you. Go ahead, do it, check it to see if your value is going to be numerical. Mind you, the result is going to come out as either true or false. So you get it and you see that. Now we are coming to casting strings and float to integers. Sometimes you need to cast a numerical value into another data type. The integer or int val functions are often used to convert a value to an integer. Let's say we have a value that is not an integer or a string. It can be used to convert let's say we have a value that is a string. We can use it to convert it to an integer. So if we have it this way, let's go ahead and see what it's going to look like. Okay, we're coming back to our text editor now, and we have it already written. We have a variable with an integer, then we have a cast value. We're going to see if it's going to cast this into an int, and we have this also in a string format, and we're going to give it cast. I'm giving it caster because we've already used cast here, and we can't call it twice with the same variable name. So we want to see how this comes out in our browser. Loading it, and we'll see that both are given out as an integer. If we go ahead to want to make this, we can say var dump, just to verify if we are actually right. Var dump, and see what we are going to get. We see that it's given both as integers. It's saying this is both int, but mind you, the first initially written one is given as string. If I have to say, let me copy this break and add it here, and ask you to say a variable dump of y. We have it as, it's telling you that y is a string, but because we've casted it and changed the int type to int, it is now reading it as an int. So it's very okay if we have a value that is coming in. Let us say this often occurs when people are to fill a form or fill something and they are writing it as a string, or we can use it to convert it to an integer, or we can convert back from integer to strings. Now we have the math functions. There are some functions that are embedded in PHP that are mathematical functions. We have the pi function, we have the min, we have the max, we have the abs, we have the square root function. Now the pi function, it returns the value of pi, 3.14, and the decimal places of pi. We have the min and the max, which helps us to determine which number is the minimum and which is the maximum in a given set of arrays. We have this is used to, the ABS function, this is used to find the lowest or highest value in a list of arguments. The square root also, this returns the square root of a number. If you have a square root of 64, it's going to return 8. You can go ahead and practice this together. We also have the round function. It rounds up the number to the nearest whole number. Just as we know, we have rand. Rand also displays a list of random numbers. You can add the option min and max parameter to specify the lowest integer and highest integer to be returned. If you want to use a rand, for rand, you can put it in, give it an argument for this is representing the lowest and this is representing the highest. So what it does is it generates a number between 10 and 10,000. So I'm going to give you as an assignment to go ahead and play with all these things and see what it gives you.